Dansei, Jenny Blackbird, Nitsukasun, Kahuwe'ya no Chi. My name is Jenny Blackbird, and my father's family is from Kahuwe'ya in Alberta, and my mother's from Finland. I grew up here in Toronto. I love this city, and I work at the Center for Indigenous Studies for the Ciimaan Qajaq Indigenous Language Initiative Program. And today I'm going to be helping you make one of these beaded poppy pins. So I will walk you through the steps, and I will also show you the different things that you need, so stay tuned. Okay, so some of the first things you will need are your beads, obviously a poppy red and a black bead for the border and the middle part, and a contrasting color for the edge stitching, so a green or whatever, be creative, whatever you like. Then you will also need your poppy template, your paper, so you can size it, play around with it. I got this clip art off the internet and put it in a Word doc, and then I printed it. So I think this is about a 2-inch in diameter. So you need your paper, you need your felt that you are going to bead onto, because you're going to bead right onto this paper, so you can staple it down or tack it down with a few stitches. This is an example that I've just stapled on. And this is a little flimsier felt, but that's okay if you don't have the nice stiff stuff. You are going to also need a backing, so maybe a piece of vinyl. It's a little stiffer. If you are stuck with just using felt, it's cool. It's not as sturdy, but it'll do. Then you also need your pin backing, and I believe Danny may have another kind of a stick pin. So Danny can help you figure that one out, but I'm most familiar with this kind of pin. And so now we'll go to the next steps. All right, here we go. So we have the poppy template that's been attached to the stiff felt. And we're going to think about how we want to start this. Many people have their own ways of starting their beadwork. Some people actually do the outline first, all the way around. There's different techniques. With these poppies, though, I like to start with the middle part and then do these 4 radiating portions, the border, and then fill in with the red, and then I outline this part. So it's up to you, and take your time. And also, I have another cool thing that I am going to share with you. Or maybe you do it already. I don't know. I use this nice big bead for the middle, the very middle. So I'm going to try this. You can follow along, or you can also use just one bead. That's like I think these are all size 11s. You can use that, or a giant bead. So I've already threaded my needle and knotted the thread. However you do it. This is the single needle. Some people do the double needle technique. I am going to start this way. So I'm just going to poke through here, and excuse my multi-pokes because I'm wearing reading glasses and I can't really see, even with the glasses, what's going on sometimes. So I have to kind of poke around. All right, now I've got this nice big bead. I think it's a size 6. No, wait, it's a size 8 probably, because I think the lower the number, the bigger the bead. I guess it's with like piercing gauges too. I don't know how that works. Anyways, so I'm going to add my first big bead in the middle. Should be centered. It's all good. You can figure out if it needs to be taken out or not. I think that's pretty good. Now I am going to make a little circle around this big bead. So I'm going to fill this needle and kind of guesstimate, test it out. How many beads do I need to circle this big bead here? Well, I don't think that's enough. I think I need some more. So maybe 4 more. Let's see if this is a good, oh, that's a good start. Okay, so you got a little loop here, little loopy. I think that should be okay. I mean, I could even take one of them off, so I think I'm actually going to take this guy off by running him back through the needle and the thread and pulling him off. Okay. So I'm going to go back down through this hole where the thread came up from. And always remembering not to tangle my thread, because tangling and unknotting the tangles is not the fun part about beading. Ooh, it is not fun, but I'm sure everybody's done it. And it's a good opportunity to look at what you've done and figure out how you can do it better. So here's our little circle. And I'm going to go back and tack down these circle beads. And I did mention in an earlier video that sometimes people, yeah, they do the double needle. So I would have pulled the beads through with one needle and then done the tacking down with another needle. I'm very clumsy, and I know I would tie myself into my beadwork, so I generally don't do that, but you figure out what works for you. And there's also different school of thought about how many beads. Some people do every 3rd bead. There's a few beaders who are absolutely incredible, and they do pretty much every bead because they have the control. They use their thumb to hold everything down, and they get beautiful curves and they get beautiful clean lines. So if you want to do that kind of delicate and intricate and detailed work, do it. Go for it. But if you just want to do a quick beading job on this guy, it's totally cool. And figure out where you put your needle back in. I need one more. And so these are the little seed beads, the little ones you can get from the store that generally so many of us have our do we say it's a beading addiction? When we go in to just get one vial of beads and then you walk out with a few hanks. And then you have more beads than you know what to do with. So these are just seed beads, and with this one you can see it's just, those are all seed beads on the black outline. I thought I'd try something fun, and I am missing a bugle bead. So these bugle beads I will use, oh there it is, I will use for these little points here instead of lining up all of the seed beads. So I'm going to go through here with my needle and use one of these beautiful bugle beads. Say that 3 times fast. Beautiful bugle beads. Beautiful bugle beads. Actually, I wasn't saying it very fast. It's kind of slow. Okay, so I am going to finish this off. I'm going to turn off the camera and we'll come back in a second and see how this looks. Here we have the 4 little bugle beads stitched down outside that little ring of seed beads. And the next step you can take is to bead the outline all the way if you want, or like I said previously, I usually bead just the line, maybe up to here, and then I leave this space in case I decide that I want to make it bigger, or just to make sure I can ensure that the shape looks good. Because if I fill this in, I don't know if I would be able to fill it in or cram in all those beads. You don't want to get them too crowded. You want to make sure that the beads fit in quite nicely. So what I will do is I will start my row of black beads, and this is so simple. At least I hope it is. I hope it's not too much of a weird thing. Oh, look at that little mystery gold bead. Do you ever hear the stories about the spirit bead? How some people put a bead that's not quite the same color or the same shade, and they kind of hide it in with their beading, because that reminds us all that no person, no human being is perfect. And in many cases, people say, only the creator is perfect. So it's just kind of a little reminder that it's okay if you're not 100% exactly like everyone else. It's totally cool. That's the beauty of being human. We can all be individual, and we can all be ourselves. And so when you put that in your beadwork, it looks really cool. And sometimes people are really subtle about it. Like they'll put a red, but the red will be just a little bit darker or a little bit lighter. So it's kind of fun to spot the spirit bead. And then other times it's really noticeable. Like someone will put in like a pink in with red. And I guess depending on how different people see different shades of color, you might see it completely different and go, what do you mean there's a difference? Because remember that thing that happened on the internet with the black and blue dress versus gold and white, and people were like just totally freaked out, and people were arguing online. And then it happened again with a running shoe. It was either pink and white or gray and green or something. So I guess it's interesting to see how human beings have different ways of seeing things too, and that's totally cool. And once again, that reminds us that we're not perfect. Not everything is the exact same. It's totally cool. And everyone's poppies will be different too. Everyone's poppies will have their own special touch or their own way of being made. So after I've put down this first line of beads, I'm going to come back to you when I'm finished all this, and then we can start on the red beads, and maybe we can throw a spirit bead in there. I'm going to look for another red that we'll just kind of squeeze in there. And we're back. This is how it looks now that I've put these the 4 big lines here out of the seed beads, and now we're going to look at filling in the poppy. And take my red beads. I kind of like these darker red, but you could also use a lighter red too. Poppies are different colors, or different tones, different shades of red. And I'm gonna put this one in there as your spirit bead. So, ooh, you may be able to see it, maybe not. It's very subtle. And the fun will be randomly picking it out to lay down in the poppy. So I am going to start with adding a bead between this line and the bugle bead. And another tip here is that this part is all up to you as well. So you can decide whether you want to go and build rows, or if you want to do it this way, or however you want to do it, however you feel comfortable doing your own beading. It's totally up to you. As long as you get the results you're happy with and you are proud of your work, that's great. And you just keep doing your work. You just keep trying different techniques, keep practicing, keep finding the ways that make it easier for you, because remember, folks, it's not a competition. Not a competition. Nobody's going to hand you a big prize at the end of the day for the best beading. Unless you are in a contest, but this is not a contest. This is a really good time to reflect, and I'm sure you're probably so tired of hearing this, and also of knots in your beadwork. You're tired of hearing that this is such a difficult time with all the Zoom meetings and the virtual meetings, and we are not able to get together in person to do that special connection that so many people do when you're doing, when you're doing beading or sewing together, those kinds of things. We're not able to do them. So hopefully one day we can get together again in person and actually, have the tea, have the chat, have the cookies, eat together, and share stories, share beading techniques. I mean, I know Danny had put some notes in the previous video that I'd created for you, and that's pretty helpful. So it's really cool when people can say, oh, well, this worked for me, or oh, this is a really good way to untangle your thread, or make sure that your beads are stationary. So it's really cool, and to find the best ways to help each other out, because at the end of the day, you want to be really happy with what you're doing. You want to be content with your beadwork, and you want to really make sure that you feel good. Don't ever feel bad because you think your beading isn't good enough. You made it. It's good. It's cool. So I am going to continue all the way around. I may come back and show you a little bit more, but I'm going to just start this way, and then we'll come back and work on a little more, okay? Whoops, I keep shaking the camera. So now that I have completed this first round here, I am going to go and add a bead. So you'll kind of get the idea that there's 1, there's 2, there may be 3 on the next row, and on and on and on. So you can get that idea. And remember, you can always just place your beads in there before you stitch them down, just to see if they'll fit. Not bad. Okay, it'll work. So see that? Yeah, that's cool. So that's our next step. We're just going to do 2s, and then we're going to keep going around and around in a circle. Just like that. And don't forget to tack them down. We didn't tack down the first row because it was just a single bead. Hopefully you get the idea. So I will be back to do row 3. So stay tuned. We're back after a little bit of a break there. You can see I've built up the rows, I've added one bead, and so on and so on and so on. So I'm going to continue with my beading and create the beaded poppy. And because these aren't exactly the same size, you kind of have to squeeze them in there. It's totally okay that this didn't match up exactly. Once again, it's not a contest. And you can totally make it work. There are no problems, only solutions. Yeah, that'll work. I'm going to take this bead off. So we're going to keep building around and around until we're done. Remember when we talked about the spirit bead earlier, where sometimes there is a bead that is not the same color or the same shade or tone as the other beads around it? See if you can find the spirit bead in the piece that I'm working on. I snuck it in while I was working on this before I started filming. So it's pretty subtle, but you could put a deliberate different color in there if you wanted to. It's totally up to you. And when you're wearing it, and if somebody says, hey, there's a different color bead in there, you'll be able to tell them. And there are various different sources and different people who also talk about the spirit bead. There's some good resources. Christy Belcourt wrote a book about beading, and there are several different artists online who probably talk about it. So just poke around, do some research, and learn a little bit more from different perspectives. Can you see it? Now we have finished all of the main part of the red poppy. Now I'm going to try and finish this off and leave enough room for the very tips of the poppy flower. I think this is okay, but then when I look at it again, I'm going to take this last bead off because I want to leave enough space to put in some black beads for the border. So this is just how I do my poppies. If you have another method, that's completely cool. But this is just an example. So I put the final big row of red beads like that and leave enough space so that when I connect this black outline, they won't be too crowded. So that's what I'm going to do all the way around, and then I'll come back and show you the next steps. Just coming back to show you how I did the second part here, or the next row actually. See, I've left a little gap there, and I've left a little gap there, just so I can fit that outline. There you have it. So I finished all of these big rows. Now I'm going to add just a little bit on either side to kind of build up the shape, kind of like that petal shape, and then we'll work on the outline. So I'm just gonna go in here once again, just leaving a little room for the beads, those black outline beads. I'm gonna add these and sort of count how many will fit in there and make sense. And as you can see, the template, some of the edges are a little uneven. It happens. It totally happens. Sometimes you think it's symmetrical and it doesn't really turn out to be symmetrical. It's totally cool because when you rip the paper off, it'll be fine. The beads go where they need to go, I guess. And I'm going to try and see if one more is going to look good here. Play around with a little bit, maybe. And another thing you can do too is once we've filled in the outline, if you see that there's spaces, you can add beads. You can also insert them in afterwards, like this. So they don't have to be all this direction. They can be like this. I don't know, what is that? Portrait, landscape. So you can kind of play around with that bead direction, and you can see a lot of people do that with their different works. And if you've ever watched Jamie Okuma do their beadwork, they do a lot of like they do a lot of filming of their beadwork, and you can see them adding in a bead here and there. So once you've done the bulk of your work, you can go back and see if you need to fill it in. And just keep playing around with it. Keep playing around and figuring out what works and figuring out the tension, remembering that we always need to take care of the tension and make sure things are nice and tight, but not too tight. You don't want to have any puckering or buckling, because that never feels fun when you've completed a piece and you got some buckling going on and or beads pop out every once in a while. There's probably some tips and tricks that I don't know about. Maybe Danny knows, or maybe someone else in the group knows. But once again, it's always really good to share your advice, share your knowledge, and expand your beading circle, and make sure people have some good tips to just have fun and do some good work together. So you kind of get the idea of what I'm doing here. I'm going to finish these and then come back again. And there we have it. So I've done all of the red poppy part. Now it's time to add the border. So I'm going to go through this, through the bottom again, up to the top. And I'm going to go in through a couple of these beads. And then I'm going to fill my thread, my needle and my thread with the black beads and create the first border for the petal. I think I've got a stray silver bead in there. I don't know if I want to do 2 spirit beads there in one piece. I could. I'm not sure if I'm going to do that. Okay. So see how we're going to kind of shape. We're going to shape it. So you get the idea. And I think I need a couple more beads, and then I'm going to go through these beads. So there's going to be a lot of like backtracking and going through beads that are previously tacked down. See if that's too many or just enough. Might be too many. Sometimes I just kind of hold it in place and see, okay, it might be all right, but I'm going to take this one off. It's going to take that one bead off. I think I'll just go through one bead and down through there. I'm not going to pull too tight, just so I can make sure that the tension's okay and it's not going to be too puckery. And then I'm going to squish that in and tack it all down. And so every year I make these poppies. I'm making them for, oh, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years. And I was thinking about my late grandfather, my Mushum, David John Sr. from Kahuwe'ya, and how he was stationed in World War II in Italy and in the Netherlands. And every year, it's kind of cool on Facebook. All my cousins and my aunties and my uncle, they all change their Facebook picture to a picture of our father and grandfather. And it was just last year my cousin had posted a video about Cree code talkers, because there were Cree code talkers. And my late grandfather's name was on that list. And it was really cool because I didn't know that, and I guess that would have been something that he wouldn't have talked about. Perhaps the army or the government or whoever would have said you can't talk about that stuff. So it was really it was really cool to know that he was part of that initiative, but also very complex because I don't really like the idea of war. I would prefer that there was a lot less armed conflict in the world, but that's, I don't think, ever been the case. There's always been some kind of war or some kind of armed conflict. So it's very complex. It's very, when you think about, you know, modern day warfare in the 20th century. And so making these poppies, I used to work in a big institution, and I would make them and I would show the public, and I would talk about my late grandfather. And I would always say, this isn't to condone the act of war or any armed conflict. And it's just another way to express gratitude for the losses that many Indigenous soldiers suffered. Not only like loss of life or maybe injury or disability, you know, PTSD, but many, if not all, I guess if they were Indian Act status Indians, when they joined the army, you lose your status. So when you come back, you don't get to live on the reserve, you don't get to live with your family, and that's really complicated because at the best of times, racist Canada, you know, if you're a visibly Indigenous person and you're not allowed to live on the reserve and you're trying to eke out a living in a city and everybody's very anti-Indigenous, you know, you can imagine the level of depression, not being able to be employed or being denied benefits too. I think that's what happened to my late grandfather. He didn't get veterans benefits, so they had to fight for that. And during powwows, they have the veterans song where everyone, you know, stands, and the head dancers and all the delegates and the flag bearers, flag carriers, staff carriers, they will dance the first round, I guess, the first push-up of a song, a veteran song. And I think that my grandfather every year just, he didn't want to take part because no one was really honoring him. I mean, probably our family did, and people on the reserve privately would have honored an Indigenous veteran, but, you know, government didn't do that. And so when he was chief of Kahuwe'ya for 3 terms, apparently he didn't have powwow. They didn't have powwows. And it was really interesting to hear that story from my aunt and how she said that he would support other traditional dances. He would support a round dance or horse dance or sun dance, and just not powwow. And it really, when she told me the next piece of this conversation, she said basically he didn't like the idea of people putting bad medicine or bad intention on each other. And that, sadly, that was the energy that he was seeing, that people weren't supporting each other and people weren't being kind to each other in a powwow setting. And so I think it's, I wish I had a chance to talk to him. He passed away in the early 2000s, but just to understand why he would have said no powwow, you know, during his terms as chief. And I'm really hoping that the energy has changed, that people do support each other. And that's one thing we need to keep doing as Indigenous people from different nations. If we can find that way to support each other, either through being there when somebody dances or honoring them or listening to them, you know, listening to their stories and their songs and just their voices. So it's, I think we always need to keep working on it as human beings, but as Indigenous folks, I think we need to keep trying to uplift and support each other. So with the type of work that I help out with at Ciimaan Qajaq Indigenous Language Initiative Program at Center for Indigenous Studies, there's a lot of collaboration and a lot of trying to see how I can not only help language learners have access to some cool events or cultural events it's also partnership. So I just want to say thank you to First Nations House for and Danny and the Digital Indigenous Beading Circle for inviting me, for having me here, you know, virtually anyways, in this time, so that we work together and create some beaded poppies and really think about the Indigenous veterans and the warriors that never got to be thanked, and those that never came home, because that's another thing. I don't have stats, I'm not a stats person, but we probably know that there's Indigenous veterans that died overseas, and you know how hard that must be, because we always like to be buried at home or buried near our other family members. So that's what I think of a lot when I bead these poppies. And I've given them away. I've you know, either taken money and donated it, taken a little bit to buy some beading supplies, because beads aren't free, and take the rest of it and, you know, put it towards something, you know, put it towards a cause, and a local charity, or buy somebody coffee, or, you know, just do the little things that I can do. That's how we can affect change locally. And right now we've got so much happening in Mi'kma'ki, so some of the beading that I've done, I've actually asked people to donate money if there's a defense fund, or just for folks that really need it. So those are some of the ways that we can be modern warriors. You know, we don't have to actually physically fight or pick up arms, because that's probably not a cool thing. I wouldn't want to do that personally. And it's just beautiful the way that all of us, especially living in this city too, we can really connect with others by spreading goodness and kindness. So I'm going to finish the rest of this, and then we'll work on removing the paper and putting the vinyl backing and our little pin backing. So I'm working with this kind of closure, and I think that Danny has like a stick pin type, so she'll be able to help you with that. So we'll be back when I'm done the rest of this border. I've done the border, and I'm taking the paper off. And if you saw the last video that Danny had put together, yeah, put a little note, maybe moistening the paper. Be better to take it off, kind of helps out. That word moisten creeps me out. Moist beading. Anyways, however you do it, it's totally cool, as long as you're happy with the work that you do. So now you're going to figure out what kind of edging you want to do. So if you want to put this kind of edging where you're just looping beads around it, or if you want to try and do, like we've got this kind of a zipper stitch. This is an orange shirt, by the way, it's not a poppy. And this is a different kind of edging. So if you want to leave maybe 1/8 of an inch around the cut, and then once you've done that, you're going to take your backing, and you're going to trace with a pencil, and you're going to cut, and you're going to match everything together so that you got a nice fit. And then we'll deal with the pin backing again too. So I think I'll show you the edge stitching a little better. That other example wasn't so good, that zipper stitching. So here's an orange shirt pin that I made. So this is how it can look, this zipper stitch, or just winding it around. So I've cut the excess off of the felt. Now I'm going to take my pin backing off, have that set aside for later, and I'm going to take my poppy and put it on top of the vinyl backing. So I'm going to draw on the wrong side, the side that's going to be sewn together, and I'll cut that, and then I'm going to hole punch for the pin backing. So I've got it cut out pretty good. I'm gonna flip it over. And I'm gonna see exactly where I want to put this pin backing, remembering that I want to put the opening towards the bottom. So when I'm wearing it, it's gonna be facing the bottom, because the little clasp will shut it really nicely. So maybe you can just eye it. And I'm going to mark not where the holes are. I'm going to mark where the ends of this bottom of the pin backing are, because I'm going to take my handy dandy hole puncher. I think I put it on a 3.5. You can also use scissors and you can snip. I kind of like the hole punch just because it's a cool tool to have. The holes are pretty uniform. I don't have to worry about cutting anything too big or too small. And then I'm gonna feed it through here. And this is a little bit different than the vinyl you have, or if it's felt you have, it's a little different. Texture is a little bit stretchy. And I'm gonna close it. Flip it around, and maybe I got this glue from downtown Arton Beads. I'm sure you can probably get it at any other bead store, or you can just use Weld Bond or any other kind of glue that really works well. Just gonna put a few drops here to kind of stick it together. Maybe it'll stay. I put too much on the surface and not anything on the bottom. And let it dry for a little bit. Or just stick it on. See how that looks. And if you stick it back together and there's a little bit of excess, you can just trim that off. And I'm going to be doing this kind of stitch on it anyway, so you can hide. If it's not exactly perfect, you can hide it. There's always a solution to hiding stuff that's imperfect, right? We're ready for our final step. So I've decided to use this flashy gold. It might be a nice contrast. And these beads are a little bit bigger. So these are, I don't know, maybe they're 9? Anyways, they're bigger. But it's okay because they don't really have to match what we've beaded already. So I'm going to start by putting my threaded needle, my threaded knotted needle. I'm going to put it through the back of this. And I'm going to make sure. Oh, hey, guess what? See, I didn't even knot it. It's must be clown hour. But it's always good. You can laugh. You can laugh at the little things. Oh my goodness, we have enough permission to do that right now because everything's so stressful. Everything's so stressful with meetings and Zooms and watching videos of some disembodied hands beading. Anyways, I hope you're all keeping up with your sense of humor, and you're drinking water, and you're taking care of yourselves. Because this is 6 months into a pandemic, so we need to be kind to ourselves and laugh at the funny little things that happen and have some good sense of humor. Okay, so let's see how many beads it will take to wrap around. It might take 3. I'm wondering, because these are bigger beads. Do you think that will look good? We might need another one. Let me get that pencil out of the way. Maybe even 4. No, 5. Beak, niso, nisto, neo, yawning. Trying to remember all of my numbers. Nishnabemon. Let's see if this works. Okay. Yeah, it looks pretty good. So for this, we'll do 5 beads. Yak, niso, nisto, neo, neonin. So you just keep going around like that. Bejik, nis, swe, niwen, nanen. I can try and remember all of the numbers that I know in different dialects. I don't know. Spacing is important. I think that one might be a little too far from the previous row. So I'll just take that out. And this is a great thing. You can always just take the thread out and rethread your needle. Okay, so I'm going to put it a little bit closer to the first row. Maybe that'll look a little better. And here we go. Are there too many? Nope. There we go. So remember your tension. Let's see if I can do it in Ganigeha. Ganigeha. Onska, Diagone, Onsa, Giari, Whisk. That's probably wrong, but I'm trying. I'm trying. That's all we can do. Is try. Let me see if I can do it in Yak, Niso, Nisto, Neo. I think Nyanin, Nanin. Is that Y dialect? I'm rusty. So I'm going to finish this and then come back and show you the completed piece. Completed poppy beaded pin. What I should mention, when you're dipping in here, if it's a little bit more of a dip, you may need an extra bead. So you may need Yak, Niso, Nisto, Neo, Nyanan, and Kotwas. 6 beads. And then go back up to 5 here. And then maybe 6 beads again. Just kind of play around with it, see what looks good, see what fits, see what works. And here we have it. So we're all done. With our beaded poppy pin. So that's what the back looks like. And there you go. And you can also use different sized beads for this. I have another set of poppies that I've done with beads that are way bigger. So those are easier to make in terms of time because there's not as many little beads, but there will be some differences in the size of everything that you need. Just play around with it. Feel free to contact me at jenny.blackbird@utoronto.ca or follow us on Twitter, CKQ_UofT, and we also have an Instagram page, and I think that's also CKQ_UofT. Anyways, take care, and I hope you're all well, and have a good time making your poppy pin. Bon appétit.